Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, January 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 241 days, the game against Michigan in 325 days. We had a whole different show planned for this morning, and then around 6 o'clock on Tuesday night, some pretty significant news broke for Ohio State. Cornerback J.K. Johnson, who started 5 games for the Buckeyes last season, he has entered the transfer portal. He is one of 3 Buckeyes to enter the portal so far since the end of that Peach Bowl game against Georgia. We're going to talk about all of them, plus one guy who left the portal, who left Ohio State, and has found his new home. Kevin Noon is my guest today. Kevin, 3 Buckeyes enter the portal, only 1 leaves. Can we call this portal combat, or is that too much?
No, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we know that here in the portal era that things are going to happen and guys are going to go. And, certainly a lot of times there are players that fans are like, well, why isn't he playing well enough? Well, then he transfers. Then suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, why is this guy transferring? Well, you helped happen. You helped make this happen. You go to social media and you say, this kid is not very good. And I'm certainly cleaning up the statement. So, it's difficult, but even breaking news as we're recording, Ohio State has just picked up a commitment from safety Jihad Carter out of Syracuse. So add somebody else to the mix as I'm getting a text message about it while we're recording. So it's the fast and the furious. It's the era of the portal. I mean, we can pee and moan more than just about NIL. We got the portal to worry about too.
Yes, remember when the off season was the slow time of the year? Yeah, okay. We have breaking news on top of our breaking news. We'll get to the incoming guys in a minute, but first, let's talk about the guys who are leaving, and we'll start with J.K. Johnson. He started 5 games from the Buckeyes at corner. I mean, they ran through a ton of starters at cornerback this year because they just couldn't seem to keep anyone healthy. He certainly had his opportunities to play after missing most of last year with injuries. And then by the time he got to the Peach Bowl, it seemed like he had sort of fallen behind some other guys in the rotation. So, you hear a guy who started 5 games and only in his second year, you think, wow, that's really shocking that he would leave. But, when you look at the big picture, maybe not quite as shocking as you might think.
No, I mean, Ohio State was so thin at cornerback, and I can assure you in the time from the announcement that he was leaving to the time that we were recorded, received multiple text messages. So again, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe he's leaving. Don't make me go back and show you receipts. Don't make me go back and show you your tweets of you complaining about him struggling. And yes, he did play. He did start 5 games. He had 20 tackles. It was a little bit of a challenge. He came in last year, was hurt, was not able to go, play some this year because everybody really had to play this year just due to the lack of numbers at the position, and it wasn't always clean. So sometimes when a can't miss guy does in fact miss, it's time to reshuffle the deck and go somewhere else. And I'm just surprised how much people are surprised by this move, because when he got passed over toward the tail end, toward the last quarter of the season, I was already saying, brace yourself. He's gone, because, he has the talent to be a starting corner. And if it's not going to be at Ohio State, it's going to be somewhere else. And now we know it's going to be somewhere else.
Yeah, we don't know exactly where that somewhere else is going to be, but yeah, he is someone, when you have someone who's kind of a top 50 type player like he was coming out of high school, if there's not a clear path to the field by the start of the 3rd season, a lot of times that's the type of player that ends up in the portal. So, yeah, a little surprising that he, you look at the top line numbers, a little surprising that he might have decided to leave. But that is a position where they were sort of forced to play depth this year, but they do have some depth there next year. So with Denzel Burke, with Jordan Hancock, with the emergence of Jair Brown this year, and with whoever else they end up adding in the portal, and they have some rather talented players coming in as part of the freshman class as well. There's going to be a lot of depth there, a lot of competition there. So not a total shock on J.K. Johnson. Another one that wasn't a total shock was defensive end Javonte Jean-Baptiste. He was a 4-year player, 19 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Played a pretty nice game in the Peach Bowl as well. He had some nice impact plays for the Buckeyes in the Peach Bowl. But again, this is a spot where you're probably not going to be starting next year. He's been a rotational player for most of his career at Ohio State, and has been a contributor. But this seems like an opportunity where maybe he wants to go somewhere where he might be able to start. He's a New Jersey guy, really technically from New York, but went to high school in New Jersey. It's kind of confusing, but Rutgers feels like Greg Schiano has taken a lot of guys like this and turned them into real, solid contributors for him. So maybe somewhere like that. But that's another guy where it kind of, he has been a contributor to Ohio State for so long, but it kind of makes sense that if he wants to find a spot to be a full-time starter next year, hitting the portal might make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a whole season of where he's a main frontline guy, or at least on the top line of a rotational basis, so he can have some film and more film and be able to, maybe parlay that into a scouting combine invite and who knows beyond that point. Javonte Jean-Baptiste did have a half sack, was credited with half a sack in the Peach Bowl. Certainly part of the rotational numbers. As we move on to the next year, and somebody like Zach Harrison isn't going to be back, but you think that this could be a heavy dose of JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, and then some of the young guys and everything else. Where does that leave an elder player like Jean-Baptiste? Probably on the outside looking in, getting 15, 17 snaps if he's lucky, maybe 20. And that just probably wasn't where he wanted to go. Degree in hand, everything else. He has that 1 year left. You wish him the best, and let's, I'll be curious as to see what he does at that next stop.
All right, and then the third Buckeye to enter the portal is someone who most Buckeye fans probably hadn't heard of around the middle of this season, but then who took on a much bigger role at the team after Bradley Robinson blew out his knee in the middle of the year, and that's Mason Arnold. He's a long snapper. He played the sort of towards the end of the season there, and the writing was sort of on the wall for him. He was a walk-on who kind of got forced into that starting role, and the writing was kind of on the wall for him when they brought in a long snapper named John Furlman from Arizona State during I think that was back in December. So it felt like that was a position where the Buckeyes weren't obviously totally comfortable with what they had. So now Mason Arnold is going to go head somewhere else, and that's that's another one where whenever you see them, it's like freshmen who get recruited over. If you were an active player and you see them bringing in someone at your position and it's a spot where only one guy can play, that feels like a real writing is on the wall situation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was thrust into service when Robinson went down and Bradley Robinson, and you see somebody else coming in, and what a world we live in when we're talking about long snapper transfers and everything else. But that's kind of where we're at. Mason Arnold certainly was, part of the conversation of when Ohio State was going to run its fake punt against Michigan, and the ball did not go where it should have for a fake punt. And I'm not saying that's why he's leaving, but that's why some people may be like, oh, I know that name. We normally don't know the names of the long snappers. I mean, God bless them for everything that they do. But, once again, it's a case of somebody going and looking for an opportunity. You're not rotating long snappers. This isn't even to the point of like a place kicker where you have a short kicker and a long kicker. You don't have a long snapper and a real long snapper. You have a long snapper. So, all the best to Mason Arnold and what he's going to find. We certainly have seen some other walk-ons enter the portal as well. And it is what it is. And while he isn't one that counts against the 85, every name matters at this point as, you're trying to figure out what the 2023 Buckeyes are going to look like.
All right, now we need to get to the guy that the news that broke in the middle of our breaking news podcast, Jihad Carter, safety out of Syracuse. He played boundary safety for the Orange last year. He was their starter there, made 36 tackles, 3 interceptions, had a 90-yard fumble return for touchdown. And safety is a spot, Kevin, where it feels like that, when we sort of talked about, places they might be looking to add bodies this year, safety was kind of right at the top of that list because they've had a lot of churn there. You've got guys leaving for the NFL. You've got guys, other guys who's, we'll see how the portal shakes out in the coming weeks. But I think all 3 of their safeties from the 2021 class are already gone. So there's been a lot of churn there, and that felt like a spot where they might be looking to bring someone in and to get someone with a full, with an extensive Power 5 starting experience. This feels like he's not going to be playing the same position as Tanner McAllister probably, but it's the Tanner McAllister type addition where you're bringing in some quality, a quality veteran to at least supplement and maybe help fill some of the holes in the back end of that defense.
Right, you have a couple different types of transfers out there. You've got the guy who's transferring up because he has proven where he's at that he can play on a bigger stage. You have the guys that are transferring down, and then you have the guys that are just transferring to transfer. This is a guy who's transferring up, in my opinion. And yes, Syracuse is a Power 5 program, but Syracuse is also not exactly the top of the ACC, and the ACC is not exactly on the top of the Power 5. So now you get to go to Ohio State, have an opportunity to go into a safety-led defense in a lot of ways. You're 6'2", just shy of 200 pounds, has really good size. Ohio State certainly has the need. I think that this is a big get. I mean, we sit there, and when I say we, I mean everybody who's an observer of college football, and we see this name and that name and this other name that all go into the portal, and we all focus on quarterbacks, we all focus on running backs because these are guys that are much more high profile. But this Jihad Carter news, even though I wouldn't say it was unexpected, certainly is welcome as fans have been quite perplexed as Ohio State has apparently missed out on several other targets. Whether or not it was a case of that they went completely, pedal to the metal on these guys, we don't know. There's just a lot of speculation here, but we don't have to speculate. Carter has gone to social media to confirm his commitment, so the big pickup for this athlete that will have technically a couple of years of eligibility.
Yeah, he was a 3-year starter with Syracuse, but I'm pretty sure, yes, with the extra COVID year, all the eligibility calculations are still going to be a little wonky for a few years. But yeah, he should have, I believe, 2 more years left as a potential starter for the Buckeyes. After starting 3 years for Syracuse, he was an honorable mention All ACC this season. So that's certainly a nice pickup for the Buckeyes at a position where they were looking for something. And finally, do want to touch on one piece of news about a departing Buckeye. That is Taraja Mitchell. He entered the portal back in December, stayed with the club all the way through, stayed with the team all the way through the Peach Bowl, and then announced this week he'll be transferring to Florida. That is a very nice move. Not the first Buckeye to transfer down to Florida. Jack Miller, the quarterback, of course, transferred down there last year, and he started their bowl game, but that did not go well. But that I think had a lot more to do with the 20 or so players who were sitting out the game than it did anything with Jack Miller. So yes, all the best to Taraja Mitchell as he starts his career as a Florida Gator. But Kevin, you certainly get the sense this is all a significant amount of transfer portal news. It sure doesn't feel like this is going to be the last bit of transfer portal news as things sort of shake out as we head into the close of the transfer portal window, which I believe is January 15th or so this year. But probably a little more news to come, maybe both incoming and outgoing before all is said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had thought about that on Tuesday. I'm like, I should sit down and just come up with a list of potential, at least transfers out, so I'm ready, because I do think we will see in both directions. I think that you end up having some very real conversations after the season is over, and unfortunately Ohio State's season came to a little bit of a premature end, but you have to be honest with these guys, because if it comes out that you're screwing around and giving these players bad information and everything else, I mean, players talk to players and you end up looking pretty bad. So be honest, and Ohio State has to manage a cap of 85. I mean, and that's a reality. And for every player that you bring in, you have to be able to account for it. So you bring in a 20-man recruiting class, and then that's saying that if Ohio State does not sign anybody between now and or bring in anybody between now and the February signing day, but you want to sit there and maybe look at bringing in an offensive tackle, maybe bringing in a cornerback, maybe bringing in 2 offensive tackles. I don't know. You have to sit there and have movement to keep those numbers right, because they're kind of recalculating how they want to do the 85. It used to be that it was, I think, by the start of fall camp, but now I think it's a little bit more of a case of being at 85 throughout. So not all movement is bad. Not all movement is bad. You may see your favorite player leave, and obviously that's disappointing, but it's just part of the churn.
Yeah, that is the state of the world right now. One other player that I transferred a couple weeks ago announced his destination, and I can't remember if we've talked about it in the show before, so I'll just mention it now. Safety Jansen Dunn. He's headed to Kentucky. I know we talked about it when he was leaving. I don't remember if we announced it when he announced where he was headed, but he is headed to Kentucky. And the transfer portal window closes January 19th. That was off a couple days. But yeah, we've got just a little over 2 weeks for that all that all to get sorted out, as going to be a busy time of year. Boy, there are more and more busy times of year in the college football calendar, as it turns out right now. So lots of interesting stuff to talk about, and I'm sure plenty more. Probably not the last transfer portal show we'll do in the next week or two. So I'm sure you can look forward to having Kevin back on to talk about that and plenty of other stuff. You can also read Kevin and all of his great work at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have a whole team of insiders covering recruiting, covering the team, covering the X's and O's, covering it all. It's all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And also make sure you check us out at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Lots of shows covering all sorts of different topics around the team, around recruiting, around Michigan, around the rest of the college football world, all sorts of great stuff, all at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Subscribe there, hit that bell so you get notified every time we post some new content so you never miss a thing. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.